Welcome back, revolutionaries. So today we are diving deep in the heart of the pre-revolutionary period, exploring the escalating tensions between Great Britain and its American colonies. Well, we will also witness the growing discontent, the fiery protests, and the bold acts of defiance that ultimately paved the way to independence. The question for this chapter, and for this PowerPoint, is that how did the British policies and colonial protests escalate tensions and pave way for the American Revolution? As we examine the events and actions of both sides, keep this question in mind. We will see how Parliament's attempts to control colonies are met with fierce resistance, setting the stage for a historic showdown. So the conflict lay in the policies enacted by the British Parliament. Britain, following the theory of mercantilism, believed that the colonies existed to benefit the mother country. This meant that the colonies were expected to provide raw materials to England and serve as a market for British manufactured goods. The Navigation Acts, a series of laws passed in the 1600s, restricted colonial trade to benefit English merchants and manufacturers. After the French Indian War, Britain expanded its control over North America, but also faced new challenges. The Proclamation of 1763, which forbade settlement west of the Appalachian Mountains, angered colonists who sought land and opportunity on the frontier. To raise revenue and control colonial trade, Parliament passed the Sugar Act in 1764, taxing sugar and molasses imported from West Indies. These policies, seen as unfair and oppressive by the colonists, fueled resentment and resistance. The colonists were not passive in the face of British policies. They voiced their grievances through colonial assemblies, elected bodies, and that debated and protested against Parliament's actions. Committees and correspondence were formed, creating a network of communication and coordination between the colonies, allowing them to share information and strategize about their resistance efforts. One of the most effective forms of protest was the boycott. Colonists refused to buy British goods, hitting England merchants where it hurt, their wallets. Propaganda also played a crucial role. Pamphlets and speeches filled with fiery rhetoric and revolutionary ideas circulated throughout the colonies, inspiring resistance and fueling the growing sense of injustice. As British policies tightened, colonial resistance grew bolder. The Stamp Act of 1765, which taxed printed materials, sparked widespread protests and riots. The Sons of Liberty, a secret organization, led many of these protests, often using intimidation tactics to enforce boycotts and intimidate British officials. The Stamp Act Congress, a meeting of colonial delegates, issued a strong protest against the tax, leading to its repeal in 1766. However, Parliament did not back down. The Townshend Acts of 1767 imposed new taxes on goods like glass, lead, paint, paper, and tea. This led to the renewed protests and boycotts. In 1770, tension boiled over in the Boston Massacre when British troops fired on unarmed colonists, killing 5. This event further inflamed anti-British sentiment and fueled the growing movement for independence. The Gaspé Affair in 1772, where colonists burned a British customs ship, demonstrated the increasing defiance of colonial resistance. In 1773, Parliament passed the Tea Act, which granted the British East India Company a monopoly on the tea trade. This act, while intended to help the struggling company, angered colonists who saw it as a threat to their economic freedom and a violation of their right to free enterprise. In response, colonists in Boston staged a Boston Tea Party, a daring act of defiance where they disguised themselves as Native Americans, boarded the British ship, and dumped 342 chests of tea into the harbor. This event, though costly, was a powerful symbol of colonial resistance and a turning point in the relationship between the British and the colonies. The response to the Boston Tea Party was swift and harsh. Parliament passed a series of punitive measures known as the Intolerable Acts, aimed at punishing Massachusetts and restoring order. The Boston Harbor was closed, crippling the colonies' trade. The Quartering Act forced colonists to house British troops in their homes, a violation of their privacy rights. The Massachusetts Government Act reduced the power of the colonial assembly, limiting self-government. These acts, instead of quelling resistance, further angered the colonists and pushed them closer to rebellion. In 1774, colonial leaders from 12 colonies gathered in Philadelphia for the first time, the First Continental Congress. They met to discuss a unified response to intolerable acts. The Congress issued a Declaration of Rights and Grievances, affirming colonial rights and protesting British policies. They also called for a continued boycott of British goods and urged colonists to form militias to defend themselves. This meeting marked a significant step towards colonial unity and collective stand against British oppression. All right, for all you teachers and homeschoolers, now it's your turn to channel your inner revolutionary. Imagine you're a colonist living in the 1770s, fired up by the injustices imposed by the British government. Create a protest poster that expresses your grievances and call for action. So as usual, here are some key terms that I think are important for you to look up before even reading, or at least get familiar with for this chapter. In the summary, so the road to the American Revolution was paved with escalating tensions between Great Britain and its American colonies. British policies aimed at controlling and taxing the colonies were met with growing colonial resistance, protests, and boycotts. Conflict intensified with events like the Boston Massacre and the Boston Tea Party, ultimately leading to the First Continental Congress and the colonies' united stand against the British rule. All right, till next time, have a good one.